Take two. This is the Gillmor Gang. I'm Steve Gillmor, and joining us today is the kinky British guy, Keith Tier. Welcome, Keith.
Kinky.
Kinky Tier. I think that's your name.
Sadly, I'm straight. I think the guys would like that. But girls, if you're into kinky, that must be me.
Yeah. And Robert Scoble. Welcome, Robert.
What's up?
What does that mean? Is that the aspect ratio of your new Google Glass?
Something like that.
Okay. From his Fortress of Solitude, Dan Farber.
Good afternoon.
What? Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know what the laughing was about, but
No, it was about.
here.
I introduced you as being from your Fortress of Solitude, which Tina, of course, mistook for this other guy here. Welcome, John Toshak.
Am I on your left, Steve?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Every way except politically. I wonder about that, actually. Oh, and the chat room has exploded, and we have had nothing to say. So maybe we should just continue having nothing to say and then publish the chat room.
I had nothing to say on the next web, and that's what they're all here to hear about.
Okay, well, why don't you reiterate what you've already reiterated, Robert?
Well, a lot of people, if they've been listening to Gillmor Gang for the last 3 months, know that I've been disappointed with Apple's innovation and ability to sell the future or get excited by the future. And that continues, but, watching the keynote again with fresh eyes, I guess, this week, I realized that Apple is just way ahead of the industry in how it presents technology and its approach to marketing technology. And I pointed it out, and then a lot of people said, I just don't know anything. So,
but that's part of your business model, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
They say you don't know anything, and yet they keep tuning in.
I guess. Yeah, it's interesting. Apple has so much technology sitting on the shelf that they didn't even use it in the keynote. iBeacons, for instance, which we've talked about on the Gillmor Gang, I think is a real exciting feature that if Tim Cook understood what he has in his lab, could really explain what the future is going to look like for mobile and wearable computers. And he didn't even put him on stage. So I'm wondering what's going on there. And then the mobile sensor, the new M7 sensor in the iPhone 5S, is pretty damn important, I think, to understanding our context and building new kinds of applications that are going to be pretty crazy. In fact, I hear already Apple's iMaps team is going to use that sensor to make new kinds of interactions possible. And he didn't really spend much time talking about that either. And instead, they spent a lot of time talking about the color of the iPhone 5C. Yay, team. But he understands his customers very well, and they do the best presentations out there by far.
I thought the presentation was just dreadful. I watched about 30 seconds, and Craig Federici looked like he was a cartoon image of himself, and I turned it off. I couldn't stand it.
Mark Benioff said an interesting thing when he was at TechCrunch Disrupt this week. He said they've got to acknowledge Steve, but what they're also doing is they're trying to pretend he's still there. But they're trying to do a Steve presentation without Steve. And when Tim Cook says this is gorgeous or this is beautiful, it really doesn't have the same impact as when Steve used to say it. I think they're just
why
missing.
Not? Keith,
because Steve is authentic. I mean, when Steve said this is beautiful, he actually had been through a lot of pain to get rid of all the shit that was there before it was beautiful, and he really meant this is beautiful. He actually believed it, whereas Tim is clearly marketing.
Right. I'm sorry, that just doesn't. That's such over-rotation. I mean, of course, Tim Cook is not.
That Kinky Tier should have said that.
Yeah, but of course,
Kinky
Tim Cook
T,
is
I
not
think they call
Steve
him.
Jobs, and they're still drafting off his legacy. But it's not that Tim Cook is insincere or whatever. I think what's going on right now, or that they're present, who cares, if their presentation is up to the Steve Jobs standard. The question is, are their products viable, and do they have a strategy going out over the next several years to, continue to create new markets and soak up a good percentage of the share? It seems from what they have announced here is they say, well, we're continuing with our existing strategy. High margin, we'll give you a 5S and a 5C. There's not much difference between them, but we're getting all this money from the carriers, and we're just going to continue to do that rather than put out some cheaper phone that we can't make any money on right now because we don't need to.
Yeah.
And then number two.
Number
two is, as Robert was saying, there's a lot of technology in that phone. The processor, the M7 chip, fingerprint sensor, that could lead you to believe that they're hiding something. And I think what they're hiding are products like an iWatch.
They're hiding access to the chip is what they're hiding.
Right, that take advantage of those chips and things, so that you can imagine. Here's what I would like to see Apple do: not put out something like Samsung's Galaxy Gear, which is a kind of kitchen sink smartwatch where it's got a camera and it's got its own sensors and everything else. But for Apple to put out like a $50 smartwatch that works really nicely with the iPhone and gives you all the data and has all these great applications that it can use. So it's more of a companion and not some kind of high-priced thing that nobody wants to use.
Dan, I talked to somebody who's seen the new iWatch, and he said it is stunningly beautiful. It is geek jewelry. It has a curved glass screen on it. I've interviewed the vice president at Corning Glass, and they have this new glass called Willow Glass that's bendable and curved. And the new iWatch uses that to be very, very beautiful and very stunning.
We know anything Apple does is going to be extraordinarily beautiful and elegant. The question is, will it be useful? Will it be? To me, should be more like an iPod. Cheap and sell hundreds of millions of them that go along with the iPhone.
Here's my thesis on why I think Tim Cook isn't putting the cool technology center stage right now.
It's discipline.
Well, the discipline in that he knows that Google is going to announce Google Glass probably at the Mobile World Congress next year, end of February, sometime in that range. And he wants to have a story that will take all the oxygen away from Google and put it all on the Apple iWatch and the new Apple ecosystem that's building up. With the iBeacon technology that's coming out and with this new motion sensor that's coming out. And he knows that right now he doesn't need to shoot those bullets. So I think he pulled those bullets out of the gun and said, we're not going to fire those bullets at this press conference. We're going to just keep the focus on phones and make sure that people understand the price and the feature set and the new camera and the double the speed and all that stuff. We're not going to talk a lot about the future of wearables other than just to sort of say, oh, there's this cool new little sensor in the phone. I think he pulled the bullets out of the gun, and he wants to keep those for February when he's going to need them to take all the oxygen away from Google, who's going to announce this new wearable.
But the only way that Apple could take away the oxygen from Google on that front would be to do its own glasses. Because if you really think about it, the technology in those glasses is not extraordinary. What's critical is that software infrastructure, Google Now, and the cards and everything, and the sensors, everything that allows you to have that information presented in front of your face. Like the simple application of going to a baseball game and having second screen data in front of your face from glass.
I'm very bullish about glass. I totally agree with you. But if I'm Tim Cook and I don't have glasses ready, and I don't believe in the market is ready for it. And Apple is very smart. Apple over the last decade or so has never been really first to the market. They were not first with the tablet PC. Well, you could say they were first with the Newton, but not in the modern tablet PC. They let Microsoft be out there for, 8 years before the iPad came out, right? But they come in with a product that's just stunningly beautiful and put together and has no rough edges. Google Glass has rough edges all over the place and has a lot missing. And there's not even an API yet. In fact, Heck, it has an eye sensor in here, right? We all know there's an eye sensor, and it's watching our eye. And friends of mine have hacked the eye sensor so you can wink to the thing, but there's no API, and none of the Google software uses the eye sensor yet. So we haven't even seen, what this product's going to look like. And Apple can come in. Tim Cook in February can come in and say, "Okay, let's talk about wearables now. The next phase is wearables. The next phase is this personal cloud. We gave you the fingerprint sensor for a reason, to make sure that you are signed in to your personal cloud and nobody else is using your personal cloud. And let's talk about iBeacons. Let's talk about the watch. And then maybe we're going to do glasses in the future, but we're going to come out with an Apple product, a product
I think
complete
what you're
and
saying,
stunning.
Robert, what you're saying is that Apple's a product company and Google's a technology company.
Yeah.
And products have to answer a simple question: what is it for? Before they answer the secondary questions, which is how do we build it and what is the chip and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And Apple's really, really disciplined at what is it for. And even when there's technology there sitting on the shelf, if it doesn't have a good answer to what is it for, it won't go forward with it. It'll wait until it has got a good
All right.
answer.
Well, I want to hear from Toshak a little bit, and then I want to jump in on this. Go ahead, John.
I think iBeacons is mostly Apple's attempt to lock up an application so that can market it, but that the applications may not exist yet. As far as I know, iBeacons is the software component that's in iOS 7. Obviously, but it's also in Apple devices before, because it's part of the Bluetooth standard, and they're going to make it cheaper, and Apple's volume will drive down those prices, and then Apple can consolidate it. I think by them not announcing much about it, except at the developer conference, it just means that they're not ready to market it, and they're waiting for the really great use case for it. I mean, that's pretty clear. I think that's I don't know. I think this was when I look back at this keynote, I think this was one of the better ones, because it showed Apple as more of a leader in the whole market, and they can announce things without over hyping them. They're actually under hyping a lot of the things, and I think that's by design. Because they're going to come out with something that is going to leapfrog a lot of the things in the industry.
I don't know about leapfrog. The Apple I watch from my friends who've seen it and other people who are building the technology in it won't necessarily leapfrog, but it will be much better than the Samsung watch or the Pebble watch. From what I'm hearing, it will be beautiful. First of all, those two watches. I wish I'm
not looking at it as in terms of like the individual technologies. I think each one of those is tiny steps ahead. Then they catch up. But if you look at that whole ecosystem, the 64-bit architecture, that M7 that you talked about, the iBeacons, the thumbprint scanner, the rumors and things around iWatch, whether it means iWatch TV or an iWatch on your wrist.
No, it's a watch on the wrist. I've now confirmed there's 100 people building a watch, a thing on your wrist for Apple, at Apple.
So maybe,
and it's coming out next year.
And that would be fantastic if you have an iWatch with iBeacons around and it senses TVs that are around and they have AirPlay on there, and you just hit a button and it's showing what your life in front of you, whatever screen you're on. I think that's the ecosystem I think they're building. They don't have any particular tool in their arsenal in order to market the way they used to, but they're building things from a very much of a grounds up, and I think that's the important differentiator.
I think they have a lot that they didn't used to have. Almost every influencer in the tech industry uses iPhones. And when you speak to the Next Web conferences or wherever, TechCrunch. I was watching I was at the front door of TechCrunch Disrupt, and I was watching all the phones go by. 80% iPhone. And if you don't think that's a tool that Apple can use to get the world to see a new ecosystem, that's a very powerful tool. And Tim needs to know how to guide that tool. I think he's doing okay at that. I just wish.
Well, I think the influencers have always had it, and yet, so to speak.
No, the influencers weren't Apple people 10 years. Back
when
when
the
I started
iPhone came,
working at
everyone had an
Microsoft,
iPhone. They didn't have an Android phone.
what's that?
When the iPhone came out, everyone had an iPhone.
No. When iPhone came out, everybody had a Nokia phone. All the influencers had the best and brightest, either a BlackBerry or a Nokia phone. In the United States,
Nokia,
Nokia
I think, is the one who invented iBeacon. By the way, the hardware part, the Bluetooth 4.
All right. Well, I've heard the word influencers too much on the show already, so I'm banning it.
Tech passionates.
That's better.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, so all I'm saying is that 3 years ago, everyone who was in this community of technologists had iPhones, and now that number is getting smaller.
Eh,
It is, but
Not a lot.
it's still pretty strongly Apple. I mean, when
the
you meet
easy,
with tech
the easy
passionates,
test
it's
is
pretty-
just what is the competition? What's number 2? You can't even tell. You don't know what number 2 is. It could be
the
Motorola. It isn't. It could be Galaxy. It isn't. What is it?
Galaxy
When you-
S3, actually.
The Galaxy S3 and
the
S4.
Galaxy S3 is still the biggest by far in the Android world, by far.
Okay, great. So I don't agree with you, John, that there's some sort of shrinkage going on here.
I'm talking. It was 100% before, and now it's like 80. It's
Yeah.
it's still
we
substantial.
owned 100% of landing a person on the moon until we didn't. Did we? Did we get beat on that? China, I think, is going there now.
It's a boring debate. Everyone had an iPad when the iPad came out, and then now it's at 60% of the market share. It's what happens.
Okay, so this is where I interrupt and say that I think that the presentation of the keynote was horrendous.
Interesting.
It sounded like they had. It
Were you
sounded like
listening
it was
or
coming.
a video?
It was a video. How
Yeah,
could I
were you
listen?
listening to it or watching it?
Both. That's how it kind of works.
Steve, the fact that you thought it was horrendous shows how bad the rest of the industry is at doing this stuff. I mean,
Oh, I don't.
You know,
I don't disagree with that part of your long tome on the internets about Apple's opportunity. What I'm trying to get at, however, is I'm trying to pivot off of what you said briefly about how this event changed the world. The thing about Apple is that after you wake up from whatever dream you're in about what's going to happen, the reality distortion field or the total lack of it is now the case. You get this device which completely changes how you use computers, and that's what this new phone is. The thumb thing is going to change everything because it's fundamentally. There was a very interesting article about how it opens up a lot of security holes. We're going to have people impersonating their thumbs and all sorts of ludicrous
you can't.
stuff.
I've actually interviewed some of the people who build these thumb sensors. The sensor actually looks underneath the skin at the blood flow
so there's
going
the
through
subcutaneous workaround, but in an age of 3D printers, you think that they're not going to be able to figure out how to be able to fake that? The point is that the security on a 4 or 5 digit code is ludicrously simple compared to what they're putting out there right now. So it's going to improve enormously, but it's also going
And
to
most people don't use any codes. When I pick up a normal person's iPhone and I sign in, they don't use any codes because they don't like using codes. It keeps them from getting to their information
right.
as
So
fast.
exactly, they don't put
I'm one of
codes
those.
in. Yeah, well, I'm not
And
because I work for
Keith,
a company
the fact that you're one of
requires it.
those shows how deep this problem is. The fact that you haven't even thought about the really deep consequences of having somebody steal your phone or find it in a taxi that you leave it in or something, and have all your data, all your personal data available to them. It's
No,
just,
I use Find My iPhone to wipe it when that happens.
okay. you know, you hope you get to that and learn that your phone is gone fast enough to do
Okay,
that.
but again, you're talking about the security, you're talking about the individual features. I'm talking about a complete reboot of the way we use these phones, or 80% of us use these phones.
I agree, and but it's also a great example of the way Apple works. I mean, fingerprint technology isn't new. We've been talking about it for at least a decade, and suddenly, they come up with an implementation that makes sense, and the world says, "Wow, that's innovation!" But really, it's using known technology that's very mature in a way that works in a product. And they're using it simply, as Robert says, to get rid of the inconvenience of typing in that 4-digit code.
But it's not an inconvenience. It's 100 times a day for me. And what that means
Yes.
is that I'm getting back, the way that I use the iPhone is by figuring out what it is that I'm going to do that isn't too complicated. If there's something that I have to do repetitively, if they come up as they are with iOS 7, enormously effective ways of being able to shortcut these kinds of things, I'm going to use that. I'm going to take that time and I'm going to apply it to something else. That something else is a complete reboot of the way that we use this technology. And it's increasingly responsible for I'm almost not using my iPad mini anymore, not because I don't love it, but because it's easier just to use the phone. It's just the phone is ubiquitous. I can always grab it. It's always with me. And, that's going to have a big effect. The AirPlay is going to become the most important technology on the iPhone, in my opinion. Because
I'm with you.
And that AirPlay, by the way, is on the lock screen now, or the lack of lock screen once the thumb thing is working.
I'm completely with you. I was in meetings this morning, 3 different meetings, and every single person came with a Mac, and we used AirPlay to get them onto a big screen via an Apple TV. Every single person. No preparation, no forewarning. It just kind of works.
Yeah, no, pass me the cable so I can plug in the PowerPoint. It's gone. That world is over as of when they ship this thing.
And I'd love to hear John think about the impacts of Apple's new fingerprint sensor on the enterprise. Because one thing, when I'm dealing with my Rackspace accounts, I'm far more careful to stay logged out and stay, and be careful with my passwords than I am with my Gmail account. If you hack into my Gmail account, you get into me. And maybe somewhere into Google. But if you hack my Rackspace accounts, you might get into actual corporate systems that could hurt my company, right? And so having everybody on a fingerprint scanner seems to me to raise the bar of security for the entire company, which makes me very happy.
Well, yeah, that's totally right. Access into corporate email, access into corporate systems is a huge issue that the whole industries have been built around protecting the corporation. The thumbprint scanner on there, or fingerprint scanner on the home button would have huge repercussions on the enterprise if it's done in a way that's somewhat open, where you could use that as your identity management authentication service that works with other companies that provide that identification management. Yeah. You can log into apps that aren't just in the Apple ecosystem, but your whole corporate management tool. And that's a big change because that will give you the ease of access that you want, but also gives you that level of granular security that you can have if Apple was willing to work with the corporation on this.
All right, Dan Farber, you've been way too quiet.
Oh, I've been enjoying the conversation.
Yeah, me too, but talk now.
Steve, can you tell me what time it is?
Yeah, it's time for you to start talking.
Well, I think that everybody's talking about these technologies that Apple is doing, and I just kind of read a quote from Johnny Ive, and Johnny says, "Different and new is relatively easy. Doing something that's genuinely better is very hard." And I think that's what we're seeing with Apple. They're trying to do things that are already out there, that are just better. And I think as Robert was talking about Apple doing glass, they need to do it better than anybody else. And they'll wait till everybody else has made lots of mistakes that they can learn from, and until the technology takes a couple of turns that allows them to do something more special and elegant. And so if that's the legacy of Steve Jobs, then I think we're still seeing it.
Right. So, as Mark Benioff said at Disrupt,
Yeah.
If they start thinking for themselves, as opposed to missing Steve Jobs and emulating him rather than channeling him,
Yeah.
I mean,
but there's a danger for Apple now, and the danger for Apple now is complacency, which is you could kind of read into that from the announcements. The 5 and the 5C weren't great steps forward in terms of usability. They're great steps forward potentially with future products, and so the question now is, can they deliver that next phase, and that next phase has to be pretty outstanding.
So I think the key sentence that people haven't really focused on is when they said that the new iPhone 5S is 64-bit and desktop class. I'm going to believe that that is a code word, desktop class, for what AirPlay turns into. When you think of the separation, and it's the opposite of Google. Google's integrating a screen and a microphone and a camera and a display around the eyes. I think Apple is separating components and making them talk to each other. And I think it's the desktop class CPU in the middle of a bunch of connected devices that is really what this iPhone 5S is about. And if you think about iBeacon, which is only another word for low power Bluetooth, in that context, I think it opens up a world that Apple's moving into, which is almost the exact opposite of the world that Google's trying to create.
Really?
How is it the opposite?
Explain that.
It's the separation of devices and them collaborating as opposed to the integration of devices into a single thing. Glass versus AirPlay.
I think you're missing what Google's doing on the Google side of the fence. I mean, I just got a Chromecast, and I think Google with Glass played its hand a little bit too early, maybe. But it had to, because it wanted to test this out in the public view. Soon, we're going to be able to say, show me that video here. Oh, the screen's not big enough and my battery's going to get killed. Chromecast that over to my big screen TV. Apple's ecosystem is going to work the same way. In fact, somebody said, this stuff on Apple's side of the fence doesn't matter because Apple doesn't have any market share. You're missing the point of why Apple controls this industry so clearly. If companies start adopting iPhone 5S's because of this fingerprint sensor, and I believe they will, because companies that care about their security are going to force their employees to use security, and employees are going to want to use something like a fingerprint scanner instead of remembering a stupid code. We've proved that just on ourselves. Most of the people in this show and in the chat room aren't even using codes. So if Apple starts getting market share because of this fingerprint scanner, everybody else is going to have to put one in their phone as well. And I know there's other companies that actually have even better technology than Apple's using that are on the loose, and somebody's going to buy that company. I see Google and Apple being an ecosystem play that is going to be very deep and very interesting to watch over the next 18 months. I do not agree with you.
I don't agree on Chromecast. Actually, one of my engineers got stolen by Google last week to become the chief evangelist for Chromecast. And I've got
Sorry, you just bitter?
I'm a little...
What is it that you don't agree?
So what I don't agree, I've got 3 Chromecasts. I bought 3 of them. And it's kind of okay. I've been using it. It's extremely limited in what it can connect. And AirPlay connects at the device level. And everything can be connected to everything. And once that's true, Apple gets to build an ecosystem of hardware that plays together well in any context.
I think that's true, but I think that Apple does both. But what Chromecast does is to sort of set the stage for where this is all going to go, which is that you don't talk to the device, you talk to the cloud, and the cloud talks to whatever device that you're interacting with.
Keith, you do not want to be streaming live video off of this.
Is that Dan?
I don't know who it is.
Yeah, it's Dan.
You do not want to be live streaming off of this Google Glass because the battery life just isn't there, and never and won't be for years until batteries really, really get much better, or wireless power happens, which.
But that's where iBeacon comes in, Robert. That's where low power Bluetooth comes in.
Right.
But it's both low power and wider range. So suddenly you can get
No. The low energy Bluetooth beacons don't put a lot of data through the air. That's why the battery lasts so long.
Sorry, I short circuited my own sentence. I'm talking about iBeacon and Bluetooth 4, two different things.
iBeacon uses low energy Bluetooth. Which is a piece of Bluetooth 4.
Right.
And
so that's
you do not want to stream stuff off of this thing onto another device.
I'm not talking about streaming.
I know, but that's what you are talking about.
Hang on, Robert. Let him explain what he's talking about.
I'm not. I'm saying that AirPlay, which is basically software, allows devices to work together. It doesn't have to be just video streaming. That's just one use of AirPlay. And low power Bluetooth iBeacon and wide range Bluetooth, which is also lower power Bluetooth 4, those three things together represent an ecosystem that Apple is invested in. And just think for a minute what that means. What isn't the relationship between your Bluetooth keyboard or trackpad and your desktop computer, or your Apple TV and your iPhone, all part of the same future, which is a future of disintegrated devices that work together in any combination?
Yeah, I think that's true, but I don't think that I use this stuff all the time. I'm constantly trying to have one device talk to the other one, mostly using AirPlay in order to be able to listen to music because I don't have a stereo. I've just got these home theater speakers on the TV, etc. And the bottleneck for all those devices is, the Wi-Fi collision that occurs on my network. If my daughter's on Minecraft, which there's not a second that she's not on Minecraft, and there are a couple of other streams going on here, Netflix, whatever. The music gets interrupted. So what did I do? I went to the Apple TV directly, and unfortunately, it only works with iTunes. But there's this George Harrison record that's fantastic, or Early Takes, and I just went direct to the cloud from the Apple TV. That's when they sell an Apple TV device that allows us to be able to go direct to it and program it from these smaller devices. That's what I'm going to do. And it's not talking device to device. It's talking one device to cloud to the other device.
I think that's true, Steve, but that's part of the picture. It's interesting that Lair won TechCrunch Disrupt, which is a cloud play, but it's a different cloud than the cloud that we used to have. It's basically where the cloud has functionality and services, but applications get to benefit from them. And I think it's an interesting...
well, you're agreeing with what I just said then.
I'm agreeing with what you said, but not instead of device to device. I think both things happen.
Yeah, they do, particularly when you're in the early phases. Right now, Chromecast is very, very limited, as you said, whereas AirPlay mirroring works pretty much on everything. And that same AirPlay mirroring capability is in Chromecast, although it isn't as good as going direct from the cloud to the device. So over time, we're going to go where Google is already starting. And it doesn't mean that Apple is not ahead. They are way ahead because they're, I'm buying stuff on iTunes now. But I'm also, I just bought a record, the Bob Dylan record, by the way, Farber, this is fantastic. The another self-portrait is
The new
just-
one?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
unbelievable. And I mean, his worst record, it turns out to be his best record. Who knew?
Is that the one that Happy's on?
Yeah, Happy's on that. But I bought it on Amazon. John Toshak, you want to explain how this auto rip thing works?
Explain how what works?
Auto rip?
Oh, on Amazon. So yeah, so it's I mean, we talked about this before on the Gilmore Gang, but if you buy,
Well, I wasn't
CD
listening then. Now I am.
that's because it wasn't. I should have said Apple's on, and maybe it would have,
Yeah.
So if you bought a CD on Amazon and you're part of the Prime service, I believe. I'm not sure if you still need to be Prime, but back then you did. It would send you the CD through the mail as they ordinarily did, but it would also give you the access to the cloud version, so you could play it as many times as you wanted in the Amazon Cloud Player or on the Kindle or Kindle Fire or any of those things.
Or even load it into iTunes.
And
off
you can
of the
download
Cloud
it,
Player.
right? And
That's
it's
right.
got an iTunes connector actually that loads it right into iTunes as if it's part of your iTunes library.
It's amazing. So you get the instant gratification of listening to the thing when you find it. Plus, you get the liner notes, which are embargoed and scraped away from every known cloud service. You get that in the mail the next day or whenever somebody else is enjoying my record because it was stolen off of our front door. But they're going to send me another one tomorrow. So these Amazon is getting very hip about taking what both Apple and Google are building out here and then using it for their own purposes. And it's really going to change things fast. I mean, the record business actually has a distribution method now for the first time in about 30 years. Well, I'm glad you're as excited by this as I am.
Anybody who else is interested in music, I would recommend they check out HD Tracks also. HD Track, like the album track, because most of the stuff is kind of old music and blues and classical, but it gives you the liner notes first of all. It also gives you the uncompressed form, and it's the sound is just amazing. Even now, you can definitely hear a difference on everyone's the included earbuds with an iPhone all the way up to the Scoble's Rockstar musician earphones. So it's an interesting way. Now that's like old kind of technology, old cloud technology, and they're never going to catch up. But hey, it's there. It's there now.
What is that in his ear, Tina?
Those are the ultimate.
Can you do that
ears
again, please?
Headphones that the
as much
musicians
as I
wear.
hate it, would you please do that again? Thank you.
So I just noticed there's two versions of another self-portrait. One costs $27.99 and the other one costs
$100.
a lot less. And one's got more tracks on than the other one.
Yeah, we're not going to turn this into a record show, but the point I'm trying to make is that the separation of devices, contiguous, interrelated devices, by the cloud is going to happen, and it's already starting to happen very rapidly.
It feels to me like you're inserting the cloud artificially there. I don't know that the cloud's doing much other than being a universal store.
It's like saying, what's a hard drive? I mean, what do you mean it's inserting?
Well, I'm saying,
artificially?
so what I'm saying is you're giving the cloud too much importance in the sentence.
No, I'm just talking about the reality is that one thing works, the other one doesn't. If I do AirPlay mirroring,
that's true. That's
if
true,
I do
yeah.
AirPlay mirroring, I have 100% chance of the track being interrupted intermittently for no apparent reason because my daughter is watching Netflix.
You've got to get the new Apple Wi-Fi box that does 802.11 AC, and then that won't happen.
Yep, I have that. I'm running it, and my whole house got faster, and my Wi-Fi range got further.
Okay, so what are you saying? Is somebody arguing with me about my theory?
No, I totally agree with you that the cloud is the sea we're swimming in, and The problem with the Gilmore gang is sometimes we're arguing about the waves, and sometimes
Yeah, no, I'm disagreeing. I am disagreeing with you because the bandwidth you've got in your house is very, very much bigger between the devices than what you've got between the house and the cloud. And so what you've got is some inefficiencies in the bandwidth in your house because there's no scientific reason
If
why
I
you
have
should.
if look, it's really simple. It's simple. It's math. If I'm listening to something or watching something on my iPad Mini,
Right.
I'm downloading it to the iPad Mini. So whatever the thing that it's going through to get to here from the cloud, I've already done that.
Yeah.
Now, if I then mirror that or AirPlay it up to the screen, it's additional to pulling it down from the cloud.
Yeah, but it shouldn't be a problem.
yeah.
It is additional, but it shouldn't
It
be.
shouldn't be a problem. In my house, I have 6 devices all streaming at one time. It's not a problem, and you can be pushing video back and forth from
Well,
Chromecast.
I disagree that it's not a problem for
What's
a couple
that?
of reasons. It's a problem because I've already I'm spending as much money as I possibly can spend on Comcast. I can't get any better service, and it still is intermittent. Now I can throw certain things at it, but it's just like
It's not intermittent here, man.
It's just
So-
like hard drive storage. I'm talking about the average person, not you.
Well, no, I have a Comcast box here. Half Moon Bay got a brand new Comcast line in about a
All right,
year and a half
I'll
ago.
just work back
I'm
from
getting
my
11
point.
gigabyte.
I'll work
gigabit,
back from my point and reverse engineer it.
When you-
What's going to happen is that Apple and maybe others are going to come up with a box, an integrated box, which takes all of this Wi-Fi stuff and AirPlay and makes it a switcher that you control using a small device, whether it's a watch or
That's already here.
Yeah, I agree. But when I can do it so simply that I just go out, I buy the thing, and I've got one throat to choke, I go over to the Apple store and I say, this is still not working, it's going to work. Right now, it doesn't work because the device-to-device transfer point is inefficient. It adds an additional layer of bandwidth usage that is not necessary, and it will be eliminated. What do you think, Tasha?
Well, I was actually discussing hardware on the forum, but that's what I'm thinking about. What
Okay.
is it?
I'm just saying that the Chromecast, as much as I agree with Keith that it's limited, is a better idea than what Apple's doing with AirPlay.
Oh, well, the limit makes it more appealing for those 3 things that it works with, and it allows them to focus on getting the higher resolution to the end user. Because I see a noticeable difference. I don't know why that is yet, but plugging it into HDMI versus HDMI out of a notebook and playing something on the web via Silverlight or whatever we have to do for Netflix. So yeah, for now. But I really think that the future and a lot of how they're going to monetize phones and things like that is going to be on games, and that means that Chromecast will have to work with games, and Apple will too.
I agree. I think that one of the Malik's story about the new iPhone, he basically predicts, and I think Robert, you do too, that games are going to fly off of the Xbox and onto these new phones for just the same reason that we're talking about.
Yeah, and people argue with me, but how many Xboxes have sold? Something like 60 million. And let's say that number goes up to 80 million or 100 million. It's not going to go up a whole lot. But how many Android phones have been turned on? A billion. How many iPhones have been turned on or are going to get turned on? Many, many times more than Xbox.
Dan Farber?
Yes.
What about this IPO from Twitter? You wrote something about it.
It's no surprise that Twitter has been working over the last few years to set itself up for this IPO, and it looks like they're in really good shape to go out with a good number.
And when do you think that's going to happen?
I think it's likely to happen at the beginning of next year, first quarter.
Do you think that they had a trigger, which the second that Facebook went over their original top, that they would immediately file?
Well, I think you try to time it to market conditions, and Facebook is on a good roll, and there's some hope for IPOs. But I think it's more that they, if you their balance sheet, their future growth. I mean, there was some concern I saw in the journal reported that they wanted to be at 500 million. They're probably closer to around 300 million uniques per month, and but yet you look if they have a decent revenue ramp against those users. I mean, that's basically what counts even more than the number of users. So it's been as I wrote, it's been very impressive what Twitter has done over the last few years to advance the product. And as I said, the danger for them is to supersize, which is to get away from the roots that it's really about brevity, it's about compression, condensing everything, and then from that point, allowing other things to surface, but not to get in the way of those 140 character items with links and hashtags and hats and directs and so forth.
And Robert, do you think that's the biggest problem they have is 140 characters?
No. What's the biggest problem Twitter has right now? Growth is going to be the big problem. Can they grow in the future and get more of our share of time and more of our share of mind and more money out of us? You've seen Facebook navigate that pretty well, and that's why the stock's going up over on the Facebook side of the fence. It'll be interesting to see.
As Francine says in the chat room, Facebook has all those deadbeat users.
I get more engagement on Facebook than anywhere else, so and from better quality people generally.
Better quality people.
Yeah.
Well, it's not a one-horse race either. I mean, they're
I can talk to Michael Dell,
And Twitter is really about the real-time internet and taking advantage of that, and these incredible defining moments where everyone's going. And I would predict that Twitter is going to try to make more out of its direct messaging service, as well as all of those brand promotions and integration with TV and trying to be that experience where if you're at some live event or if people are socializing around something, that you're using Twitter to communicate about it, and even to do things like compete with Yahoo, which is to say Yahoo is a big media company where people go to get news and weather and so forth. There's no reason you couldn't do that on Twitter and then see what people are saying about it.
So the interesting thing for me, we got to remember what happened to Facebook, which is that they went public before they really had figured out their revenue. And actually at a moment when their desktop revenue was slowing and their mobile had not yet kicked in, Zuckerberg at TechCrunch Disrupt this week, I thought was awesome. And I'm not inclined to want to like Facebook, but I've got to just take my hat off to Zuckerberg. I mean, he has nailed mobile advertising revenues by his install. Basically you can pay for an install for your app. I spend money for just me there. Twitter's advertising, by contrast, is, firstly, it's brand new. Secondly, it doesn't work very well. And thirdly, it's extremely expensive on a per install basis. So I'm a bit worried that they're going a bit early, and I just wonder if Dick actually needs to raise money and is doing this as a preferred option of raising money, because it is, before anything else, an IPO is a financing event. That's about all it is. And a liquidation event for those who want to get out. And if you do it at the wrong time, you get nailed.
I think you're onto something, and it's something that we've been talking about on Gillmor Gang for a while. I really like the news filtering that Facebook has. I know a lot of people don't like it, but in mobile, and certainly in Glass, you do not want to see every single tweet that's coming through the system the way I am seeing on my screen I was just showing to you. You want the system to pick only the important ones to show to you. And Facebook is way, 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 way ahead in that game. Twitter doesn't even have noise
Well,
filtering
they,
like
they
that.
just they just introduced verified filters, which
Yeah, which don't even
it's-
work on my account yet, and I'm a verified person. It's showing me noisy stuff. In fact, let me try to pull it up. You know, I just don't believe that Twitter's machine learning is even close to what Facebook's trying to do.
Well, Twitter doesn't
that's
really
probably
want.
true.
Twitter doesn't really have the goal of doing that. I mean, Twitter is really giving you the control to choose who to follow. It isn't giving you the control to choose to filter what that person puts in front of you, and it gives you
But it's
search.
So, this
I was just,
verified
I was
filter
just
is.
Wait, hang on a second. Uh,
Well, I think as Costello has been saying for several years, you know, Twitter's biggest problem is onboarding new people who, aren't news junkies or Twitter fiends. And that will continue to be a problem. I think that's what we're talking about right now, which is for Twitter to grow, they need to be accessible to more people and not be this incredible river of stuff that, it's hard to figure out what to do with. And I think that, the next phase for them is to really push hard on trying to make Twitter more navigable by mere mortals.
I was talking to Dave Marin, who runs Path, last night, and he said something really interesting. I said, "Who's your competition now? Is it Instagram?" And he said, "It's a combination of Instagram and Snapchat." And he says those two are really the competition for everybody in this industry. Like, and Keith, I'd love to hear what you think
And
about
Vine,
that.
I add Vine to that. That's exactly right. I mean, just me has been very challenging because of that. I mean, if you divide the world into Snapchat, Vine, and what's the other one? Instagram on the one side, and then WhatsApp, Line, WeChat on the other side. Mobile messaging kind of falls into two buckets. The bucket that's inspired by media sharing, and the bucket that's inspired by instant messaging. And the instant messaging bucket kind of represents the end of life of a behavior to me, and the Instagram bucket represents the start of life of a behavior. It's really communications taking the form of media sharing. So if you want to be in the world of communications or messaging, it seems like that Instagram, Snapchat, Vine world is the authentic world, but it's not yet a messaging or a communications world, although users are trying to use it that way. And the future is in figuring out how to, release that desire and give it the product that it needs. And it's not easy. I mean, we talked a couple of weeks ago about how hard it is to combine conversation with streams, for example, in a meaningful way. It's really hard. And I think Dave's right to say what he said, and except I would have added Vine in there as well, because I think video is part of it.
Well, I think that unfortunately Dan seems to have left the building, but what he said about direct messages as being a huge opportunity for Twitter, I think, is right on target. I use Twitter direct messages all the time. I'd say maybe 30% of the. I mean, I don't tweet a lot, but I use the direct messages as a form of tweeting. In order to basically communicate with, for business reasons. And hopefully he'll come back and we can maybe drill down a little bit more on that. But John Toshek, you have any thoughts on this?
Well, on Twitter going out earlier? Or
No, on what Keith was just talking about in terms of a sort of a...
filters and noise.
And also a move away from end of lifing of instant messaging and moving into a more of a
Instagram, Vine, Snapchat kind of messaging world. Inspired more by media sharing than it is by instant messaging.
Well, I mean, a lot of those are not enterprise friendly at this time, but that doesn't mean that they won't be accepted at some point later on. I think there's got to be a messaging bus that takes into account all the messages, and Twitter direct messages are they're an authenticated way you can talk to people in a very easy to use way. I mean, so that's a good.
Dan, I just want to catch Dan up. I was trying to sort of pivot back to what you had said about Twitter's opportunity for direct messages. So that's why there's a two-shot here.
Yeah, they haven't really pressed hard on being more chat or even doing, they could do things like Google Hangout. There's a lot that they could do if they want to go in that direction, which would be, do I have to go to Facebook to do chat, or can I do it, or Google Talk or whatever? Could I really do it within Twitter for those?
Right. Well, they're even going farther
question.
away.
Yeah. Well, the question is, if the game is to have more time spent and acquire more users, especially the more time spent, because that's if you've got active users who are engaged, you have more data about them, you can target and personalize better. I mean, that's probably the preferred route to go, which is you increase a couple minutes of time per user on average. That could be a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think generally Twitter seems to be hiding the ability to do direct messages, and it hasn't diminished the use of them as far as I can tell. But it's hidden in the web interface. It's hidden in the iPhone and the Android interface. It's just one level deeper than it needs to be.
Yeah, and partly it's a little bit dangerous because there have been too many episodes of people where they thought they were DMing.
Yeah, and that starts with the history of you used to have to type the letters DM before the message, and sometimes you'd forget or something,
Yeah, except
so
it isn't DM. I mean, that's the best way of making it public what you're trying to say privately.
Yeah, the D. So that's. But I think Twitter's DNA is broadcast, dispatch, and engagement over a topic.
Yes.
And they do that. Nothing really beats that. I mean, it's just too much. There's volumes of information, and the more volume, the better for them. And the more topics that happen, the more trends they get, the more data points they get, the more locations they get. I think they're a very powerful force in the industry.
Okay. So you go ahead, Robert.
I just wanted to say I have to get out of here because I have a meeting with Shell.
And hello to Shell, who's behind you.
Yeah.
You want to say promote your book as if it needed any more promotion?
No, the book ships September 25th, and we're really proud of it. It covers a lot of what we talk about on Gillmor Gang and a few other things, including how cities are going to change, how cars are going to change because of this stuff, and how privacy is going to change.
All right. And just around the table quickly, starting with Keith Tier.
Great show. Thank you for having me, and nothing to add to what we discussed other than I can't figure out which of these Bob Dylan things to buy. There's too many of them.
Well, the big one's got 2 books, and it's got the band and Dylan in front of John Lennon and Paul McCartney and George Harrison at the Isle of Wight. So you ought to listen to that. It's the missing link between Sgt. Pepper and the Basement Tapes.
So you're saying buy the $100 one, $98.98, 4 CD set.
I'm saying that, but right now some FedEx guy is listening to it and enjoying it, not me. Let's see, Dan Farber.
Well, I'd like to wish one of our members a happy birthday. I think it's Kevin Marks's birthday today.
47 years old.
And then for all of you who are going to be fasting tomorrow, have a good fast.
Do we have to?
Oh, once a year it doesn't hurt. I might do you some good.
All for this mythological super being that doesn't exist. Okay.
Well, you're not going to have to.
It's a little tradition. You don't have to get too spiritual about it.
I'll do it for the kids.
The food will taste better the next day.
That's it. There you go.
Okay. Well, I've been fasting anyway. No bread. No hamotzi lechem, whatever. All right, John Toshak.
Great. I think we should talk about this the Intel things that are going on at some point too, because we didn't talk about it enough and how it's going to change. It's been on the front feed. It hasn't been on the show. And then also talk about talk about
What? You dropped out.
Sorry.
Is that me?
No, that's me.
No.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. So
Robert's
yeah.
head is
Anyway,
talking
it's
to
great.
him.
It's a great show. Everyone have a good weekend.
Okay. And Robert, any last thoughts?
I think it's interesting that we spent another show talking about the ecosystems and didn't mention Amazon or Microsoft or BlackBerry.
Yeah. Well,
And I think that is
I
telling.
mentioned Amazon. I'm going to go listen to my record. All right. This has been the Gillmor Gang. I want to thank Rackspace and particularly Rob Legess, without which we wouldn't be here right now. We'd be doing something else, but it wouldn't be on video. And I want to thank, speaking of video, NewTek, and I'm really getting sick of drooling over all these incredible boards that people like Keith Tier and TechCrunch and just about everybody have. Rackspace, yeah. So I'm going to go panhandle on the corner for dry
Somebody should do a mashup of the new tech plug and then send it to them.
No, they're aware of it. They say
But a mashup would be be pretty awesome.
At some point, they have to sell one instead of giving them away. Actually, Rackspace bought ours. So
a lot of people are buying them. They're a great product. How about that?
go see Mark Benioff and tell him to put 20 grand up. You know.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to have you and Tina come around to my place and use my one in the interim to show them how awesome it would be if they did give you one.
But that would take away the last plug of the show.
he's got cameras. This guy's got his own Gillmor Gang going on down there in the next. Is it the same room that you're in right now?
No, I'm at work now, but
okay.
It's at home.
All right. So I want to thank our producer and director, Tina Chase Gillmor. Thank you. And I want to thank John Toshek.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Tina. Happy fasting. Have a good weekend.
Robert Scoble.
Thanks. I'm out of here. Shell and I are going to spend some more time putting together our presentations.
Excellent. Dan Farber, it was great to actually see you with moving images. And the audio is a bonus.
Well, I'm improving my technology. I'm getting a lot of help.
Excellent. And Keith, as always, you lend a gravitas to the show that is frightening me.
It's just the English accent. There's no gravity.
Exactly. It's like that old Woody Allen line about, in France where they all speak French.
Now I get it. Keith reminds Steve of the Beatles.
No, I don't have the.
It's the only reason I have these guys on the show is because that's where the Beatles came. But they came from Liverpool. It was really
I don't have the Liverpool accent.
fantastic. Let's do a whole show that way. Thanks to everybody that showed up, and especially those who didn't. And the chat room, as always, you guys are rocking. You're the fifth Beatle for sure. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.